Ahmed al-Sharaa has become the first Syrian leader since 1967 to address the United Nations General Assembly. From a former al-Qaeda terrorist with a $10 million bounty on his head to a statesman dressed in a grey tailored suit and burgundy tie, the transformation was complete as he took the podium. He was equally at ease shaking hands with world leaders and posing for photographers. How a 42-year-old Syrian went from being a jihadist to being feted in New York City is a question that even a former US general could not resist asking him.
Please help us understand how you got from al-Qaeda in Iraq 20 years ago to where you are today, Syria's head of state on stage in New York City. Please help us understand how you got...
It was a rare encounter between a man who once waged jihad against American forces in Iraq and a former US general. If you didn't know it already, General Petraeus was the head of the multinational forces in Iraq while al-Sharaa was fighting and imprisoned there for 5 years between 2006 and 2011. And here's al-Sharaa's reply. Take a listen.
At a time when we were in combat and then we now move to the discourse, we went from war to discourse. Someone who went through war is one who knows most the importance of peace.
Surreal coming from a former terrorist. This man is now pushing for peace with Israel. Given a history of conflict and the enormity of what is at stake, the world has to perforce take him at his word when he says that after decades of rockets, raids and rhetoric, Syria wants to live in peace with Israel. But the question is Ahmed al-Sharaa the man for it? And will Netanyahu oblige? Syria and Israel have technically been at war since 1948, but they opened direct talks after the December 2024 ouster of Syria's longtime ruler, Bashar al-Assad. Syria hopes to finalize a security pact with Israel by the end of this year.
This course is ongoing regarding peace, number 74. I believe that we have reached advanced stages, and I hope that that will lead us to an agreement that will keep the sovereignty of Syria and also resolve some of the security fears for Israel.
Within 5 months of coming to power, al-Sharaa had gained an audience with President Donald Trump. They met in Saudi Arabia. Trump promised cash and legitimacy in return for peace with Israel. And almost immediately, al-Sharaa took Trump up on his offer. Talks kicked off in earnest, first indirectly and then via direct channels. These negotiations spanned many cities and continents. The US moved quickly and removed al-Sharaa's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham from the list of terrorist groups. Trump also ended some sanctions in June, but not all. US lawmakers are debating if and when to repeal the act that imposed wide-ranging sanctions on Syria. But the Israelis have been lobbying US lawmakers and policymakers alike to keep sanctions in place, arguing that the US should not give away all its leverage on Syria in one fell swoop. But al-Sharaa is pushing for complete lifting of sanctions. He warned that the region would face a new round of tumult unless Israel reaches a security agreement with his government.
Israeli threats against our country have not subsided since December 8th until today. Israeli policies are operating in a manner that contradicts the international position supporting Syria and its people. in an attempt to exploit the transitional phase, which exposes the region to entering a cycle of new conflicts, the end of which no one knows. In response, Syria will use dialogue and diplomacy to overcome this crisis and pledge its commitment to the 1974 disengagement agreement.
A quick word about the deal that's being negotiated. It would see Israel halt its cross-border attacks in exchange for Syria agreeing not to move heavy equipment near the Israeli frontier. Syria, as you might know, is just coming out of a 14-year-long civil war that killed 500,000, displaced millions more, and left its economy in ruins. Al-Sharaa believes that a security deal with Israel would persuade the West to pour in much-needed money for Syria's reconstruction. As for Israel, a security pact with Syria could mean a quieter northern border, no more surprise rocket barrages from Syrian soil. And if Syria eventually decides to join the Abraham Accords, much like how the UAE, Bahrain and Morocco normalized their ties with Israel in the year 2020, well, it would be another big win for Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu spoke about possibilities of peace opening up in his address to the UN General Assembly.
Israel's victories over the Iranian terror axis have opened up possibilities for peace that were unthinkable 2 years ago. Take Syria. For decades, the very idea of peace between Israel and Syria seemed unimaginable. Well, no more. Today, we have begun serious negotiations with the new Syrian government. I believe an agreement can be reached that respects Syria's sovereignty and protects both Israeli security and the security of the minorities in the region, including the Druze minority.
But, and this is an important but, al-Sharaa says it is too early for Syria to even begin discussing about recognizing Israel because trust is thin.
Those who are part of the Accord parties to the Abraham Accords are not neighbors to Israel. For instance, Syria as a neighbor has been subjected to over 1,000 raids, strikes and incursions. Israeli incursions in Syria from the Golan Heights, and many were killed. So what applies to the parties in the Abrahamian Accords doesn't apply to Syria.
Then there are the outstanding issues of the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon. The Golan is a 1,200 square kilometer plateau that Israel captured in 1967 and annexed in 1981. It gives Israel a commanding view of the area and acts as a shield against attacks. The world, UN included, still calls it occupied Syrian land. But the US under Trump recognized it as Israel's back in 2019, and that has stuck. And at nearly 9,000 feet, Mount Hermon is the crown jewel, Syria's highest peak that straddles the border. So, will Israel vacate the occupied lands? The short answer is no. Israel's foreign minister Gideon Saar says it is non-negotiable. Israel will hold on to the Golan Heights, something that even al-Sharaa acknowledges. The Syrian leader says the current talks are not about the Golan Heights or Mount Hermon. Netanyahu's office says any deal is contingent on ensuring the interests of Israel, which include the demilitarization of southwestern Syria and preserving the safety and security of the Druze in Syria. Remember, clashes erupted in July in Saavedra, the Druze-heavy southern region of Syria, and Israel bombed the area in defense of the Druze. The Druze are an ethno-religious community. The Golan Heights is home to 25,000 Druze. They maintain close ties with Israel.
Of Israel, Jews and Druze have been brothers in arms. We have fought together. We've bled together. We built our lives together. When I was a young commander in Israel's Special Forces, my own life was saved by the invaluable advice given to me by a great friend, Salim Shufi, a heroic Druze IDF veteran. And that's why I couldn't sit idly by, nor could Israel sit idly by, while the Druze were being slaughtered by jihadists. And I instructed our forces to stop the massacre, which they promptly did.
So Netanyahu is firm, no vacating the Golan Heights. Israel also gets to keep the Mount Hermon outpost indefinitely for security. So all things considered, Syria and Israel are at best negotiating what can only be called a security first, peace later pact. There's one concern though, and that is how will Turkey and its leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan view Syria's moves for peace with Israel? Because get this, there is no love lost between Erdogan and Netanyahu, especially after Erdogan succeeded in installing al-Sharaa in Damascus and turning Syria into a proxy that's dependent on Turkey, something even Trump acknowledged when he hosted Erdogan for talks in the White House.
Well, I think President Erdogan is the one responsible for Syria, for the successful fight in ridding Syria of its past leader. Announcement today, he was responsible for that victory. It was a victory for Turkey.
We began the show by quoting what al-Sharaa had to tell General Petraeus. He said, "Someone who went through war is one who knows most the importance of peace." I would end by quoting another Syrian, a woman, who along with her compatriots gathered outside the UN headquarters to celebrate the presence of al-Sharaa in New York City. This woman, who sported a "Make Syria Great Again" cap, had something equally profound to say.
We want to make peace with Israel, because if there is no peace, there is no development.
No peace, no development. Like her, many around the world will wonder, can Israel and Syria overcome the hesitations of history to go from being foes to friends? We'll keep you posted for updates.